wanted to say thank you to both of the candidates, Susan Wright and Jake Elsey, for taking time out of their day to make Mansfield, Texas. This is obviously very important to us. We know that this has been a long campaign with a lot of candidates in it at one time, and now we're down to the two. So the actual voting day, I believe, is July 27th, and early voting starts 19th. Excellent. And we can vote anywhere in our counties in early vote, I believe all through the actual voting day. So very good.
And also speak up.
Thank you very much for being here. So we submitted 5 questions to the candidates in advance so they could have some time to look at it. The actual first 3 came from the Midlothian Chamber of Commerce forum last week, and then we had 2 more that we thought were specific to us and probably important to everywhere. And then we have a couple other questions in case we can get down there. So we'll just start off, and ladies first. It's always been that way where I was raised. So if you don't mind, so Susan, what is your assessment of our board?
Aren't we going to do the 3-minute opening?
Oh, my bad. Thank you so much, Randall. That's why you were here.
See, I'm more than just a time.
Susan, please. just another pretty face. Susan, please start.
Good morning, Rotarians. Good morning, Mansfield. Thank you for having us. I'm Susan Wright. I'm a public servant. I'm a community volunteer, a retired contractor for the federal government, and I'm running to be your next member of Congress for the 6th Congressional District. I made this my home for the past 30 plus years, and I love the people, I love the community, and I love everything going on here, so I volunteered as much as I could and got involved as many times as I could, as many of you have in here, and so that leads to a lot of different opportunities, and I've been thrilled with each one of them. So throughout the years as I've done this, I've been involved at the civic level with boards and commissions and advisory capacities. I've been involved in volunteer level with a number of charities and with my church, of course, and then professionally, of course, I've worked in the private sector for well over 30 years. The majority of my adult life has been spent as a federal contractor, training air traffic controllers, and I retired after 26 years as the administrative oversight for that contract, where I oversaw the record keeping and contract compliance for 28 facilities over 4 states for this region based in the DFW area. I'm running because I really want to work to get this country back on track, and I am deeply concerned with what I'm seeing in Washington. I want our Texas values, I want to take it to Washington and have our Texas values be the priority there to show the rest of the country how to do it like we do it in Texas. So I'm concerned with government overreach. I've worked with a number of you over the years, and you know that I'm very committed and passionate about local control. I believe that things are controlled best at the local level with the people who it impacts the most. And so the federal overreach that we're seeing now is troubling. The money that we're spending that we don't have is very troubling, and I want to work to address those things. I've been very active in the Republican Party for more than 3 decades, and I have, right now I'm in my 3rd term on the state board. I'm elections judge and precinct chair, and I've enjoyed all of that. I'm thrilled with what our campaign has done so far. We've knocked on tens of thousands of doors, talked to thousands of people on the phone. We're really encouraged by the outpouring of support, and excited to have the people on board that we have. I'm thrilled to have the endorsements of former President Trump, Senator Ted Cruz, and a number of you in here. So Susan Wright, I'm asking to be your next member of Congress, and I look forward to the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Mr. Elsey?
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Rotarians, folks from Mansfield. We're just up the road from you. Thanks for having this at 7 o'clock. I think this is a new model which we should, everybody gets to see what you really look like when you wake up, and I need some work on that, so this is a good practice for that. And if you need some good breakfast, 287 Taco in between Midlothian and Waxahachie is the place to go to get your day started off right. They have real barbacoa. My name's Jake Elsey, and I'm running for Congress for the 6th Congressional District. It's an honor to be here this morning. I'd like to thank my wife, Shelby, for getting me up this morning because I'm a night owl. I usually stay up late because that's when my brain is working. So thanks for accompanying me this morning, honey. And I'm running for Congress at an interesting time in our nation's life. For 20 years, up until 2012, I served our country in uniform in combat, peacekeeping, life-saving, saying an oath for 31 out of my 33 years as an adult to the Constitution of the United States. After I retired in 2012, after being a helicopter and fighter pilot for 20 years, 830 carrier landings, 5.5 years of my life on a ship, not a cruise ship, but a warship, protecting and defending this country. I never imagined that after those years of serving in war, defending our Constitution, that when I came back home, out of uniform, it's time to go back to defend our Constitution within the halls of Congress. As you know, we have an administration and a Congress right now that is running rampant over this document that I always carry with me, the Constitution of the United States. And the things that I see going on within Washington, D.C. don't have anything to do with this. It has to do with absolute, complete power. And there's no other way to put it. President Biden is on trajectory to have 400 executive orders in his first year. That outnumbers FDR at the worst point of the Great Depression by 97. Congress doesn't have a mandate. They have a 50-50 in the House and in the Senate, and we're 5 short in the House. But they're running this in a tyrannical way. They're not passing laws. They're trying to reopen the Paris environmental accords. That's a deal, not a treaty. It has to be a treaty. The Iranian deal is a deal. It's not a treaty. We don't do deals. We do treaties. We're now actually importing oil from Iran. Nothing that I see going on in Washington, D.C. would suggest to me that the people who are in charge have anything to do with the Constitution and protecting and defending it. We need to send more people who have defended this country to Washington to defend our Constitution within the House of Congress. I'd appreciate your vote. I look forward to the rest of the morning. Thank you for having me, and I'm ready for questions.
Thanks, sir. All right, so we'll rotate after each one. So this will go to Mr. Ellsey first. What is your assessment of our border security, and what would you do to resolve our apparent lack of border security?
Well, I think the first question is answered by the second, because the knowledge is, and it's not an assumption, it's a simple fact, that we are not securing our border. The number one primary job of any government is to secure the nation and her people and their sovereignty from invasion. That's the number one job of any government. We go doing other things and bailing out other people and bailing out businesses when we should be protecting our southern border. I went to the southern border 2 weeks ago because if you're going to talk about this stuff, you need to go down there and see what's actually going on. And it is absolutely abysmal. It is a humanitarian disaster of the highest order. They are, because of the Biden administration, they have said that if you bring a child in that's under 7, we won't process you. And I have seen a family of 3 get off that had people over the age of 7. And the trafficker said to them, don't forget her. There was a child who was trafficked into this country, brought by this family, never to be probably seen again. That is the number one thing the Biden administration has done. They've welcomed them here. The people down south know that this is a disaster. And they know what the Biden administration will and won't do. The people who get off those boats, off those rafts, are not from Mexico. They're Honduran, El Salvadoran, and Guatemala, and they are fleeing those countries. So what should we do about it? First of all, we should make a deal with AMLO, the president of Mexico, to get back to the Remain in Mexico policy. Secondly, we should sanction those other 3 countries to secure their own border, or they lose our aid. It's an 1,125-mile trip to walk from the northern border of Guatemala to McAllen, Texas. That's 38 days of walking at 10 hours of walking a day. They can be stopped in numerous places. It's 2,500 miles to California from the northern border of Guatemala. We need $200 million for 750 more Border Patrol agents. We need $575 million for more immigration judges and their staffs to process these issues. But the first thing is we need to build the wall. We need to finish the wall that Donald Trump promised. We need to restore the full funding. President Biden took $10 billion away from that funding effort. We need to finish the wall. We need to reinforce our border. No country can continue to survive if it can't secure its own border. We have to do that. This is an existential crisis. 90% of the heroin that flows into our country comes from the southern border. It's killing us from within and without. not to mention the humanitarian disaster of human trafficking, which is modern day slavery. For the good of our nation and for the good of the Western Hemisphere, we must secure our southern border first. Thank you.
Ms. Wright, would you like me to reread the question?
Yes, you know.
What is your assessment of our border security, and what would you do to resolve our apparent lack of border security?
Well, my assessment is that we have no border security right now. We live in a time where a president found, for whatever reason, found it necessary to undo with executive orders all the border security that we had. The challenges at the southern border they're not new. Certainly Donald Trump wasn't the first president to face them, but he was the president who addressed a very severe issue at the southern border, and he handed it over relatively secure and orderly. What I would do about it is I would complete the wall. One of the biggest issues with President Trump when I talked to him was his commitment. He wanted my commitment that I would stand firm on that, and I absolutely will. The border wall is critical. Just like you have a fence around your house and doors on your house that you lock, you do that not to be rude, not to be inhospitable. You do it for security, for the safety and security of your family, and we have to do that for our nation. We owe it to our people. I would complete the wall. I would fully fund border security, and I would honor the laws we have on the books today. We've got plenty of laws to address this. Look, my grandparents came over legally. They waited in line. They filled out their paperwork. They went through the entire process. It is long. It's not meant to be simple, but they did it, and I think that we need to insist that people do that on the southern border as well. All of Texans pay a penalty for this. Texas is having to secure the southern border ourselves because the federal government won't do it, and the DPS officers who take off the streets or off the highways to do that have to have those calls answered by local law enforcement. I've heard from all 3 sheriffs in this district, actually within the last 2 weeks, about the impact that action has had on them. So I would fully fund the wall, or complete the wall, fully fund border security, and return to the Trump immigration policies that were so successful.
Thank you. Susan, you get the next one first. What are your positions regarding foreign policy? What direction would you try to promote?
Well, I think history has shown that the world is safer with a strong America, and a strong America starts with a strong national defense. So I would fully fund our national defense and restore some of the funding that's been cut. Some of the talks that are going on now are about cutting and curbing some of that. And I would push back on China every opportunity that I can. They've made no secret that they are aggressors in the world. They intend to exert influence throughout the world and become the dominant force in the world in trade, in the military, and they've acted on that. Our trade deficit today with China is, well, the last official numbers were nearly 4 to 1. We export more to China, or we import more from China than we export to China, 4 to 1. That's unsustainable. They steal our intellectual property, they meddle in our elections, they have spies everywhere here, and we have to push back on that. Mostly they do these things because they're unchecked. They're literally unchecked. So I would push back on that. I would strengthen and reaffirm our ties to Israel. Israel is our strongest ally and our strongest partner in the Middle East. They're going through quite a few changes of their own. It's exciting to watch some of it. They have the most diverse Knesset in their history, and they're much younger. Overall, their average age is younger. They have more women. They have more minorities, and it's exciting to watch it. So I would continue our strong ties to Israel and strengthen that as well.
Mr. Elsley, do you want to repeat the question?
No, sir.
Okay.
I'm good. It's a pretty broad question for a 3-minute answer.
It is.
There are a lot of issues going on in the world right now, and you can pinpoint pretty much something in all 250 plus nations as it stands today. But when it comes to foreign policy, I was in the military for 20 years as a uniform officer, and 4 years at the Naval Academy. So I think it can be easily argued that I've been involved in foreign policy because the Defense Department is the tip of the spear for every foreign policy action we take in the United States. And I have participated in war. We started 9/11. As I said, I've spent 5.5 years of my life at sea on 9 different deployments, one on the ground, SEAL Team 5 in Iraq. And every foreign policy action that you take has consequences downrange for our men and women in uniform. And the mistakes that you make or the successes you have are directly resulted in war. We have shown throughout our history that a strong defense means peace. If you think about the times in our nation's history where we were most at peace, Teddy Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, we didn't go to war. The reason for that is we didn't appease and we weren't weak. It was only after when we generally got somebody who said, well, the world is a nice place, we need to cut back on our defense spending, and everybody's going to play just fine, that we've discovered that now we're getting into a war. FDR got us into World War II. We should have gotten in earlier. It would have saved many, many lives. Or it wouldn't have happened at all if we had a projected strength. What kind of administration do we have right now, and what kind of a Congress do we have right now? Weakness and appeasement. I don't care what they're saying about Chinese. I don't care what they think that they're going to act. We have 57 fewer major ships than the Chinese Navy right now. They're a regional force. They are taking over the South China Sea bit by bit. They're creating airfields on islands that previously didn't have anything on them. They are not paying attention to international law. They don't pay attention to the UN anymore. They are an absolute threat. In addition, they work with Russia. They work with Iran. They work with North Korea. They work with rogue states to asymmetrically attack our nation. Can you call them an enemy yet? Not quite yet, but they are definitely adversarial. The cyber attacks that they've committed against our country are acts of war, make no mistake. And they are being conducted both on our food supply and our energy supply. And we need to wake up and recognize that. As I said before, the number one job of the federal government is to protect the nation's people and their sovereignty. I don't see any actions on the part of the Biden administration. We have to do that now. We have to take back the House of Representatives. We have to take back the Senate. We make sure that when the Harris administration takes over, that we must defeat them in 2024. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Elsie, what will be your approach to addressing the issue of illegal immigration, the Dreamers, and how to enact a long-term policy for the future?
Nothing can happen with any of those issues until we secure our southern border. It all starts with that, as we discussed in the foreign policy issue. You can't discuss anything about peace until you're strong, showing that you mean business. And we need to completely, when I was in Iraq in 2006, that was the worst time of the war. We were getting hammered by all sides. Foreign fighters were coming in and attacking our troops. Militias within were attacking our troops. It was a nightmare. So what did President Bush do? He surged tens of thousands of troops into Iraq. The merits of the Iraq and Afghanistan war notwithstanding, we locked down that country and we secured the country. We have to do the same thing on the southern border. And we have to do it with the troops, the Border Patrol, the ICE agents that need to be done. So we need to increase funding immediately like that with those kinds of folks. Because when I was down there on the border, there weren't any Border Patrol to be found. It was Texas National Guard and Texas DPS, who don't have the same legal authority that the Border Patrol does. We need to make it very, very clear that you're not coming into this nation. Congress needs to pass a law immediately, because Congress, according to the Constitution, has the laws of naturalization, which means that if you come here from a foreign country and you're pregnant and you have a child here, it's widely accepted that that child is now a citizen of the United States. Congress, with the passage of a law signed by the President, can make that stop. The DREAM Act was an act, much like a deal with Iran, much like the climate accords. It was a deal. It wasn't a law. It has no force of law. It was an executive order that even Barack Obama said he didn't have the power to do until he did it. And then we have an overactive judiciary who, once Donald Trump, rightfully so, rescinded the DREAM Act, got it reversed by the courts. That doesn't have anything to do with the Constitution. So we don't talk about the DREAM Act. Those are people here illegally. We don't talk about anybody here illegally until we secure that border. But the DREAM Act, as Donald Trump should have done, rescinded that executive order. It does not have the force of law. I understand that lots of folks have been here for a long time. They're still here illegally. We don't get to pick and choose which laws we follow. And we shouldn't. Thank you.
Ms. Rock, would you like to repeat it?
Yes, please.
What will be your approach to addressing the issue of illegal immigration, the Dreamers, and how to enact a long-term policy for the future?
Well, I don't believe that we should pick which laws we enforce and which ones we don't. So whatever emotional reasons there are for ignoring a lot of our immigration laws, I do not believe are valid. So once we secure the border, we have to address that. Congress is the one who's going to have to pass whatever immigration laws we have. Look, I said it earlier, my grandparents came through here, many thousands of people come through here legally every single year. It's worth it. It's worth it. It's not meant to be simple. It's not meant to be simple because it's not an easy thing to get. People have died for this nation to secure our freedoms and to protect the citizens. And if you're going to become one of them, one of us, you should go through the process. The laws are there for a reason, and we haven't updated it in decades. Absolutely, we should revisit it, but it should be what the people decide it should be. We should have a national conversation about this. And we need to, in the meantime, we need to recognize that illegal immigration is harmful to the people that are doing it. We're told that they're coming here just for jobs and to improve their lot in life. And I believe a lot of them do come over here for that. I believe that's what they begin their trip on. But from the moment Biden signaled that he was going to essentially offer amnesty, he was going to reinstate the DREAM Act, he was going to look the other way, the caravans began consolidating again and coming up here. That is no life for anybody. Someone's funding it, and they're not good people. And what those people are coming up here to do is not what ends up happening to them. The vast majority of them end up in worse situations than they left. And the situation at the border, the humanitarian crisis, is unspeakable. I suspect that many of the people in worse conditions, living conditions today, than what they left. And they spent their family's life fortune to do it, and they will spend the rest of their lives here trying to pay back the coyotes and whoever else paid for them to get here. So I would stop that by finishing the law, securing the border, and enforcing the immigration laws we have today, and fully funding border control and ICE to enforce, implement, and control what's going on down there. Thank you.
Thank you. So next question, Mrs. Wright. What do you see as the role of the federal government in education?
Well, I really see that as very limited, right? Because there's nothing that you can do at the federal level that's going to fit everybody everywhere. Most of the 6th district, I'm happy to tell you, has outstanding schools and education opportunities. Mansfield is awarded every year just about, I think, for their outstanding schools, for their excellence, and the kids are just amazing. But that happens because educators and parents work closely to develop a program or series of programs to educate their kids. What works here is probably not going to work in Montana. Maybe it will, I don't know, but the people there should decide that. At the federal level, they can't do something that's that specific. So the Constitution does guarantee education. It's left to the states. It should be left to the states, I believe. It should be left to the parents and local ISDs. Texas got that bit right with local school districts and ISDs. A lot of states have state-mandated education, state-run. Ours is local. And I think that's best, and I think that that's borne out in the excellence and the outstanding results we get here from our schools and our education opportunities for our kids.
Mr. Rosa, would you like to repeat the question?
Yeah, yes, sir, please.
What do you see as the role of the federal government in education?
Good question, and I better get this right because I see Superintendent Cantu in the back from Mansfield Independent School District who's watching, and the Assistant Superintendent is, right here. So, one of the reasons that the primary reason Shelby and I moved to Midlothian, Texas, was the outstanding public schools. Our children who are age 12 and 9 go to Midlothian public schools. They reflect our values. We love the local control concept that we have here in Texas. We appreciate the fact that the legislature, of which I am now a part, has worked very, very hard the last couple of sessions, particularly this one, in spite of COVID and in spite of the lack of money that we anticipated coming in. We fully funded the education department, the educational process here in Texas, added extra money to it, held them harmless against the children that aren't being in school, because we recognize that according to the Texas Constitution, good public education is a right here in Texas according to the Constitution. So I was very proud to participate in that. I also recognize that we can't fully fund all of our education needs, particularly the 14% of of special education needs here in Texas without the Department of Education's funding. What I don't agree with is a long-seated, long-running effort on the part of Washington, D.C. and the Department of Education, which has only existed since 1980, by the way. It's only a 40-year-old agency that has accumulated great amounts of power in an attempt, and sometimes in an attempt to indoctrinate our children. We're seeing the effects of that right now with the riots that we have in the most extreme parts of our country. So I don't agree with CRT. We took measures, we passed a bill, 3739 by Steve Toth, in the Texas legislature to ensure that CRT is not taught in our public schools. So while I agree that teachers should have a great leeway in teaching our children, CRT should not be taught. And if any effort comes from the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. to allow that to happen, you're going to hear from me. Those are some things that you just stand up and say, I don't care what happens to me in the future, that cannot be allowed to. We don't need federal regulations and strings attached to the money that comes into our state from the Department of Education. As it is right now, we're going to have a special session to address the COVID money that Congress passed without any rules attached to it, but they're not going to give it to us until they attach the rules. Most of what Washington, D.C. does is both inefficient and ineffective, with the exception of securing our country. That's why I say the primary job is to secure our country. But to try to teach everybody within this country, according to the doctrine of the DOE, when the people in the Valley of Texas have different needs, and the folks in Highland Park, the folks in Perryton, Texas, and the folks in El Paso, that's why we have local control. Fewer strings attached. It's your money that the DOE washes, hires some people to take care of, adds ideas to it, and strings attached, and then sends back down. I'd like to see more of that money stay within the state of Texas. Your tax money stay within the state of Texas, so that we can effectively educate our kids without indoctrination.
Mr. Elsie, the federal deficit has exploded in recent years. Should we be concerned? What are your thoughts on its rise? How do we take steps to reduce the deficit and to achieve a balanced budget?
It probably wouldn't surprise you to know that for 20 years, Congress has not passed a budget. That doesn't seem possible, but it's true. Currently, we exist on continuing resolutions, which do nothing but give unpredictability to our Defense Department and to the rest of the government writ large. They're more interested in regaining election and being on TV than they are about doing their job. You secure the border, you pass a budget. What do we do here in Texas? It's a constitutional requirement to balance the budget when we pass one. On budget night, we pass a balanced budget because the Constitution says so. I think it's time for a balanced budget amendment in the United States without a line item veto. Although I am for a line item veto for the president, that goes both ways. But I think it's time for a balanced budget amendment. The Biden administration is proposing $6 trillion in spending. How much money that is? We don't have $6 trillion. Our debt now equals our GDP. Only nations that have debt that measures the GDP, equals the GDP, they tend to fail. That is the trajectory we're on. We're writing blank checks. We wrote a COVID blank check without having any idea how we were going to pay for it. Our country's going broke. I will be a deficit hawk in Congress. We owe it to our kids. My kids are going to have to pay that bill. In fact, their kids are going to have to pay that bill. We used to talk about our kids having to pay the bill for the debt that we were accruing. It's now our grandkids. We're way past my kids having to pay for it, and they're only 12 and 9. The spending is out of control. You have to secure our nation. You have to secure our border. Everything else gets cut. As we talked about some of the agencies that haven't existed for very long, you might want to take a look at broad-based, large percentage cuts in that. Because I know one of the wealthiest places in the United States is Washington, D.C., and that's where all the government workers are. You can't fire a government worker. You can't get rid of them. Once you've got something in the budget, it never goes away. So let's spend the money on the things that we know we must do in this country. Secure our border, secure our nation. Everything else is subject to cuts. I don't need this for a career. I don't need this to get reelected. I will stand as a budget hawk to say enough is enough. Pass a budget first, balance that budget, stop the deficit spending. We can't afford to do this anymore. It's time to stop now. Thank you.
Let me repeat the question, Ms. Wright. The federal deficit has exploded in recent years. Should we be concerned? What are your thoughts on its rise? How do we take steps to reduce the deficit and to achieve a balanced budget?
Well, should we be concerned? I think we should be horrified. I think we should be very concerned about spending money we don't have without any real plans in a little bit of a slipshod manner. That's not how you live your lives, and that's not how you run your businesses, that's not how I live my life. And we don't have an income problem in Washington, we have a spending problem. And a lot of that comes from emotional spending. Think about how you live your life in your home. If you don't have a budget and you get paid, and you go buy the things you want to buy and do the things you want to do, and for 3 months you don't pay your bills, and then all of a sudden you have to come to Randall and get the bank to give you a loan because, oh my gosh, they're going to take my house, my lights are going to get turned off, they're going to take my car, I've got an insurance bill due, what am I going to do? And Randall's like, well gosh, you're in a big mess. Okay, let's take care of this and we'll sort you out. And then 3 months you do it again, and Randall's rolling his eyes this time. And you can't keep bailing, they can't keep bailing me out. Why? Because I'm being irresponsible. That's what the federal government is doing with your money. That's what we're doing. We're having continuing resolutions. We're going right up until the very end, the very last moment. Right now we've got a debt ceiling measure coming up for a vote. It should come up this month. It probably won't. We've got a few more days, a few more weeks left. They'll wait till the last second. They're going to tie a ton of expenditures to that, and they're going to hold, effectively, hold people hostage until they pass it with the threat of an economic collapse of our nation. Is that responsible? Is that the thing that should be done? How would your businesses run if you did that? They wouldn't, not for very long. So we need to return to normalcy. We need to return to responsibility. That involves regular order, where requests get submitted to committees based on what the request is. The committees have hearings. The committees put together their piece of the budget. The whole budget gets put together. It goes to the House, it goes to the Senate, it's voted on, amended, whatever happens, and gets approved, and that's our budget, and then that's what we stick to. That's what responsible people do. That's what should be done with your money. That's what I would do. There's no need to raise our taxes right now. Just no need at all to raise our taxes. We don't responsibly spend in Congress the money you're already sending us. So why would we do that? We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't. We wouldn't keep sending money down a rat hole. And that's what we're essentially doing. I would support a balanced budget amendment. We've had a lot of regulations passed in the past about we can't spend without showing the income for it. We're going to make cuts to address the income increased spending, but then we waived it. So we've got to balance the budget. I won't raise taxes. I won't use earmarks. That's the same thing as a CR in my opinion. It's a round process, and I wouldn't support that either. Thanks.
So time's going really well. We're now into what I would call the bonus round. We have 2 additional questions. This first one's rather lengthy, so bear with me, Ms. Wright. It has been said that the project to expand Highway 287 will take more than 5 years to complete and will extend from I-20-287 interchange to Heritage Parkway only in Mansfield, Texas. If that is correct, it does not include the Highway 360 and 287 interchange. 287 is a vital and growing link for the southward expansion from Arlington into Mansfield, Midlothian, Waxahachie, and the southern end of District 6. What assistance can you, in your office, if elected, provide to ensure the expansion of State Highway 287 to its greatest extent and benefit District 6?
That is an outstanding question, and like Representative Elsie, I drive that all the time. That needs to get addressed. There's no question about it. It's way better than it was. That's a fact. We drive it very, very much, but it needs to get completed. So to me, the best thing to do is to have a budget, put it in a budget. And why does that help? That helps Michael Morris and COG and the transportation people have firm plans. That helps them make solid decisions so that whatever state money we have doesn't have to go in to supplant the federal dollars that aren't coming here. So I would make that a priority. I would talk to the Chair of Transportation, Representative Eddie Johnson of Dallas, and our other Transportation Committee members. I would ask for their help to get that put in as a priority, to get it passed immediately, and so that the state can begin to make plans based on that. We can do a design-go project, so that most of what the state does now, when they design a project for a short bit, they get that let, they start building, they do the next design, so they can make more progress and keep it on budget rather than wait until they get the whole funding, wait till they get the whole design. Sometimes that's 8 to 10 years. By the time you let the bids, you begin to work, the cost has gone up. And in today's inflationary world, it will go up exponentially. So what I would do to process that, to prioritize that, put it in the budget, do it quickly, do it as a design go project, and get it out so that we can help the people right now as fast as possible.
Michelle, would you like to repeat that?
No, sir. No, I got it. Listen very intently.
Yes, sir.
That was a big question. But, you know, we're familiar with it because we both travel on 287. But as you said, the primary distinction that must be made on that is that it's a state highway. We have funding for the highways within the budget at the Texas level. I really don't want Congress getting anywhere near 287. While I may be one of 435 and have some influence, you let the federal government step in, they're going to muck it up. In Texas, we do an outstanding job because we have a limited legislature that meets only 140 days every 2 years. And of that 140 days, only about 70 days of that is actually sitting in committees. You don't get appointed to a committee for 2 months. And then you start the committee work, and then you start talking about these things. So I would work with David Cook, who's a dear friend of mine, fellow freshman from here, and your former mayor, to ensure that 287 gets addressed appropriately. In fact, on a different issue on 287 over by the racetrack in Ennis, we had another death 2 weeks ago. And we've got an overpass over there right off of Midlothian. That's a good start because since I moved here, 287 has exploded in its traffic issues, and it's only going to get bigger. I want to keep it as a state highway. So as a congressman, I would like to help David Cook and whoever represents this district to continue to get whatever they need, but largely stay out of it from the congressional level. And at the state level, we have taken care of more funding. But next week I have a meeting with TxDOT. I'll bring it up to them next week that I completely agree with you that it's become a major highway, even though it's only a state highway. I think people are starting to realize it's built right, it works well, and it's far better than the interstate you travel on. So here at the state level, I do think more attention needs to be paid to this area that is growing just like Frisco did 20 years ago. We can't avoid the fact that Southern Tarrant and all of Ellis are growing at an explosive rate. And that's why what we do at the second special session of redistricting is going to be so interesting, that we're going to see massive growth, and infrastructure must be meted out to take care of those issues. So we need water, we need power, we need roads here for a growing area, and you have to plan ahead for that. So I'll meet with TxDOT next week, and I'll bring those very issues up.
Thank you, sir. So to you, Mr. Elsie, the role of bipartisanship seems to be an endangered way of legislating. Many votes, or the more publicized votes, seem to be straight party affiliation. Is this a concern? If so, how do we return to a Congress of both parties working together to serve the needs of our country?
It's a really good question. The issue of bipartisanship is once we recognize we're all Americans and we believe that this is the greatest country on earth, we can do a lot towards bipartisanship. If you are of the sort that believes that this country is inherently evil and should be changed dramatically, I can't work with people like that because I don't believe that. This is the best country on earth. We've made tremendous strides all over the world and within our own country on taking care of our people, on having an outstanding education system, having people who care for each other on a local level better than anywhere else. In the Texas legislature, most of what happens there, 90% of the legislation that passes, nobody pays attention to. The Texas miracle occurs in spite of the fact that we don't have a year-round legislature with people who are paid a salary that is exorbitant. We get $600 a month. There's not a single person in that building that makes money when they're down there. In fact, they have to come home, spend some time at home to re-earn what they've lost. I'm one of those. We work together because we all use the roads, we all use the water, we all use the power grid. We all need energy to be taken care of. Most of what happens at the state level, nobody pays attention to. But if you're listening to Pravda, which is mainstream media now, Texas Tribune, News, it really doesn't matter. They want to divide us. They want to capitalize the W in white. They want to capitalize the B in black. That's not who we are. We've been a melting pot our entire lives. And it's better than ever now. We elected a black president twice. And somehow now we have systemic racism. I'm not buying it. And we don't need to attach a capital to the appearance of people in this country. I'm an American first, and I'm a Reagan Republican. I'll work with those who can work. But I believe this is the greatest country on earth. I will always believe it. And it seems really dark right now, because there are forces, Communist Chinese Party, as she alluded to. There are forces, there are enemies in our midst, and they need to be confronted. But make no mistake, this is the best country that's ever existed. And I don't believe that for one reason, for 1 second, that God didn't create this country. I believe it. I have faith in that. That God put this country on earth to guide the rest of the earth and to show the way, to be the light on the hill. Our best days are ahead of us, but before that, it's going to get ugly. So when we can be bipartisan, we can. We all need the roads. We all need the water. If you're trying to destroy our country from within, I can't do that. However, I'm not going to attack you on TV. I conduct myself with quiet professionalism, just like I did in the U.S. military. That is the habit for me. That is my guidepost. And I'm a Christian. So I conduct myself according to those tenets because I'm raising 2 children in the Christian way. If I don't conduct myself in Congress or in the state legislature according to the tenets of the Bible, I'm a hypocrite. And I can't afford to do that. Thank you.
Ms. Wright, would you like me to repeat?
You would. I made some notes, but you
You're
didn't.
good. The role of bipartisanship seems to be an endangered way of legislating. Many votes, or the more publicized votes, seem to be straight party affiliation. Is this a concern? If so, how do we return to a Congress of both parties working together to serve the needs of our country?
Thank you. So what we see today is legislation by public opinion, and it's no real surprise when you think about it that the partisanship started. It's certainly worse today, I think, than it's ever been. But I believe it started when we stopped passing budgets. So in about the mid-90s, we stopped that. And I'm talking about at congressional level. So what happens? Well, if you don't have committee work and you don't have the regular order that I keep talking about, and you don't have a budget, nobody's talking to each other. Whoever's in control of the House and the Senate creates what many people call messaging bills. And the For the People Act. Let's talk about that one for just a second. It's supposed to be for the people to help us, the people, get confidence in our voting again and have confidence in our elections. And there's very little of that that actually has to do with it, and most of that is not even constitutional. The Constitution says we're going to run the elections, not the federal government. Everything else is what Democrats want for their own ideology, items and issues. Not that that's a bad thing necessarily. They got elected for that, right? Republicans get elected for their ideology and their issues. But when you pack it all into a messaging bill, it doesn't go through committee. It doesn't have input from the other members of Congress. It's made by leadership. It's tossed out there, and leadership tells them, this is our bill, we're going to vote for it. That's what happens. And so what's going to happen to the other party, the minority party, happens on both sides, by the way. What's going to happen? They're going to push against it. Why? Because the bulk of what's in there is stuff that they're ideologically opposed to. Their voters are opposed to it. Plus, they had no say in it. As long as we talk at each other through the lens of media, we're never going to be able to work together. Look at us in this room. If I want to talk to anybody about anything, I'm going to come to you and talk to you about it. Do you want me to get on a radio show and blast you for something that we've never even had a conversation about because I presume you're going to oppose me? No, but then you are going to oppose me, aren't you? That's where we are. So how do we combat it? I think we go back to a regular order. I think we have conversations with each other, and I think that we, as members of Congress, and I think that we behave responsibly, stick to the budget, stick to the order, and work together for the good of everybody in the country.
So before we start our 3-minute close, I just want to say thank you to the candidates for coming and to our Rotary Club for allowing this to happen. And I would encourage you to take what you've seen and heard today to expand our reach into the community. Elections are important, and we have a chance to take an opportunity to share what we've seen, share what we've heard, with those in our community, because what they do is very vital to the future of our community, whether it's on the state level or on the federal level. So thank you very much. So we'll start with you, Ms. Wright. You were the last one, so you can start your 3-minute close.
Thank you. I want to echo the thanks to the club for putting up with us this early in the morning and for putting this together. I do appreciate it very much. I appreciate any opportunity to talk to people. I'm very excited about the opportunity to speak to you about my thoughts on being your member of Congress. I've got a strong professional background. I've got a strong civic engagement and volunteer background, and I've got a strong political background. And I think those things together will work to make a strong voice for you in Washington. I've got deep, deep roots here, deep ties. You know me. You can count on me to be what I say I'm going to be, because that's what I've been all this time. And I've worked with a number of you in this room for so many years, and you know that that's true. In addition to being the contract oversight professionally for all those years, when I retired, I became district director for this House District, 96. Then it was Representative Bill Zedler. Now it's our own David Cook. And I oversaw the district operation. So the constituent service piece is very important to me. I was thrilled to get that job because I love working with people for resolution and to solve problems. And that's what I got to do. So I want to take that to Washington for you, to be your voice. I will be a very district, citizen-based member of Congress. What you have to say is what guides what I do. I'm your employee, and I'm your voice. So I won't be telling you what's happening other than to report. I want to know what you want me to do, and that's what I'll do. So I ask for your vote. I ask for your support. I appreciate all of the time that you all have given us this morning, and I thank you.
Mr. Eldon?
Thanks again for having us this morning. This has been a lot of fun, and it sure did wake me up, so thank you. I want to read a couple of things to you. While we need to address the issue of immigration and the challenge we have of undocumented people in our country, we certainly don't want any more coming in. Let me elaborate. Illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple. Until the American people are convinced that we will stop future flows of illegal immigration, we will make no progress on dealing with the millions of illegal immigrants who are here now and on rationalizing our system of legal immigration. The first statement was from Nancy Pelosi as Speaker in 2008. The second one was from Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in 2009. Well, that sounds like we got a bipartisan agreement on shutting down the border. The hypocrisy of the left is staggering. It goes hand in hand with H.R. 1, which seeks to nationalize our national elections. That's not in here. It's specifically prohibited by the Constitution. You don't see the mainstream media talking about that. That is an unconstitutional resolution. Pure and simple. It would never make it. It's not going to make it out. If you think about the root of what the left does, it's not about you. It's not about raising your kids, your grandkids, or your freedom. It is about power and control. They ask you what you need. Do you need that car? Do you need to travel overseas? Your carbon footprint is terrible. Do you need that extra pair of shoes? They want to think for you. The left has always been that way throughout the history of our world. And the far left has taken control of the Democratic Party. So you have the two leaders of the Democratic Party 13 years ago saying, we got to stop illegal immigration. The indoctrination and the youth coming into the leftist party, the Democratic Party, has ensured that we've taken a shift to the left. It's not about the preservation of this and your freedoms. It's about control and power. The next congressman that needs to go up there needs to be somebody who's going to point that out, and I think I'm that person. We came from 23 and now we're 2. There's 2 Republicans, so you have a hard choice to make, and I appreciate it. And you're going to be well served by either one of us. So I'm privileged to be up here today. We're going into a special session in the Texas legislature on July 8th. Poor timing, but necessary timing. I'm proud to have been able to be in this legislature. And we're going to address election integrity and bail reform during that special session. Next Wednesday, I'm going down to the border with President Trump and Governor Abbott to readdress this issue. When I get elected, I'm going to have 3 district offices, 1 in each county. and I'm going to do my job with quiet professionalism, honor, and dignity, to honor those who have served and those who are no longer with us after serving this great nation, so that we can preserve the Constitution of the United States and the freedoms that you and I enjoy and demand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So to close up our meeting, every week when we meet, we